Everyone has an image of Princess Diana in their head, in a beautiful dress with a crown under the camera flashes, but few people know what she was like before all that glitz. But her story didn't start out as a fairy tale, rather as the life of an ordinary, a little lost girl from a good but far from ideal family. Diana was born in 1961 into an aristocratic but impoverished family. The house was big, the title was there, but happiness, not very much. Parents constantly quarreled, and when Diana was only 6 years old, her mother left the family. This greatly affected the girl. She grew up very sensitive, vulnerable, and always looking for warmth, which she lacked in childhood. At school, Diana did not shine. She twice failed exams, because of which she felt stupid. But despite this, she had a dream: to become a ballerina. She took up dancing seriously until she realized that her height, she had grown to 178 centimeters, was hindering her career. That was the first blow to her dream, and perhaps that's when she began to feel different. Although Diana was modest, she possessed some special charm. Her teachers called her shy but kind. She was easy to get along with children and adored animals. Her friend recalled that Diana could spend hours babysitting sick puppies and helped elderly neighbors just like that, without a request. Even then, she showed the same care for which she would later be loved by millions. When Diana was 16 years old, in her life flashed a man who would forever change her fate. It was Prince Charles. He was dating her older sister Sarah at the time. Diana was just in the room when he came to visit. No one would have thought at the time that it was this quiet girl with blonde hair who would one day become his wife and the most famous woman in the world. But fate with her was not in a hurry. After school, Diana worked as a nanny, lived in a small flat with her friends, and traveled by bus. She wasn't rich, wasn't glamorous, didn't stand out in the crowd. But it was in that modesty, that humanity, that was her real strength. And just when it seemed that Diana's life was beginning to get better, a very different story began. A story not about love, but about rules, about how a real girl got into a fairy tale, but not one where princes and happiness live, but one where everything is prescribed in advance, and the protagonist does not know how her role will end. When Prince Charles started paying attention to Diana, everything looked like a romance from a girl's dreams. Beautiful gestures, receptions, camera flashes, the Queen's approval. The country cheered. Here she was, the future queen, sweet, modest, perfect. But behind the scenes, it wasn't so beautiful. And especially the night before the wedding, when Diana learnt the truth, from which she, in her words, froze the blood in her veins. Everyone was waiting for this wedding as a real fairy tale. On 29th July 1981, millions of people took to the streets of London, and 750 million people around the world watched the wedding on television. Young, modest Diana marries the heir to the British throne. A white dress with a long train, gold fanfare. Everything looked like a scene from a magical film. A day before the wedding, Diana found in Charles's things love letters to Camilla Parker Bowles. In one of them, he confessed that he would always love her. Diana was shocked. She cried, shut herself in her room, and said she didn't want to get married. But she was told, "It's too late. The whole country is waiting for the wedding. There's no turning back." Imagine the pain of going out in public, knowing that your fiancé is still in love with someone else. And it's not just anyone. It's the woman he's been involved with for years. Camilla, as we now know, never really left Charles's life. Their relationship never ended even after they got engaged. And here's another detail that speaks for itself. Diana's engagement ring was not custom-made like all royal brides. It was chosen from the usual Garrard jewelry catalog. Anyone with enough money could buy one just like it. No symbol of uniqueness, no respect for the moment, just a pretty picture for the public. It was a wedding where what mattered was not the happiness of two people, but a picture for millions. And Diana understood that. She was thrown into a maelstrom of traditions, responsibilities, and societal expectations, and yet no one asked if she was ready for such a future. The ceremony itself hadn't gone perfectly either. Diana mixed up the groom's name. Instead of Charles Philip Arthur George, she called him Philip Charles Arthur George. And Charles, for his part, didn't pledge to be faithful to her in his vows, even though that's a standard part of the oath. Trivia? Perhaps, but they were already talking about something more that day, and that was just the beginning. Diana thought she could handle it, that she'd fight for love and build a life, but she had no idea what she'd face after the wedding. After a lavish wedding, the world thought Diana had the perfect life, royal receptions, palaces, traveling, titles. But outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, things looked very different. Diana was not in a fairy tale, but in a world where everything was decided for her, where her every word, gesture, and even her facial expression was examined through a magnifying glass. Buckingham Palace became for her not a home, but a prison with golden walls. Everything was there, the servants, the royal outfits, the title. One thing it lacked was simple human warmth. From the very beginning, she felt like a stranger. Diana said that in the royal family she was treated as a problem, not a person. She was not taught the rules of the court, did not give advice, did not help in difficult situations. She herself recalled, "I was the only one who cried in the lavatory after official receptions because I felt like a nobody." In public, Diana had to smile, wave, and pretend everything was fine. Even after William was born, she was forbidden to show emotion. She wasn't allowed to cry, look tired, or just say, "I'm having a hard time." Everything had to be beautiful. On the outside, a happy family, but on the inside, cold and empty. This tension made Diane start to get sick. She suffered from bulimia, a disorder in which a person causes themselves to vomit after eating to cope with stress. Diana admitted that the illness became her way of screaming for help when no one would listen. It was especially hard for her during her pregnancy. In one of her moments of despair, she even tried to harm herself, just to express her pain in some way. And worst of all, her suffering was ignored. Instead of sympathy, she received advice to hold on and keep quiet. There was no support from Charles, the Queen, or her entourage. Her loneliness was so deep that she once said, "In this palace I am surrounded by people, and I have never felt so alone." When one feels loneliness, one seeks support, at least from loved ones. But Diana wasn't even lucky enough to have that. Those who were supposed to be there for her became her main adversaries, and enemy number one became a woman who all this time remained in the shadows, Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman who stayed close to her the whole time. She didn't disappear after the wedding. On the contrary, Diana felt her presence in literally every moment. During the honeymoon, when everything was supposed to be about love, Charles read books about Camilla, wrote her letters, and according to Diana, even dreams were not about his wife. On the yacht where they were holidaying, Diana once heard a servant say, "Everything would be perfect here if it weren't for that third extra." And he didn't mean Camilla. Charles was with Diana, but his soul was with another. And the royal court not only did not interfere, but turned a blind eye. Camilla was accepted at social events. She was treated as a member of the family. For them, she was theirs, and Diana, too emotional, uncomfortable, too alive. When Diana tried to talk about her experiences, she was advised to keep a straight face and keep a low profile. And when she once cried in front of the Queen after hearing Charles say, "I don't have to love you," the response was, "Well, what did you expect? It's not a film." Diana felt she had less and less room for herself. Her emotions were ridiculed, her pain was ignored. She became like an extra in her own family, and more often she turned for help where she shouldn't have, to journalists, It was through journalists that she tried to tell the truth about her life. But as time went on, it backfired on her. What at first seemed like a salvation became a weapon. The media made Diana the most photographed woman in the world. She was followed at all times, on a walk, in a shop, with her children, on holiday. She couldn't leave the house without being caught in the lens. Even when she got sick, flashes continued to work. At one point, paparazzi paid tens of thousands of pounds for one good picture of Diana, especially if she looked tired or upset. But things got much more serious when she started talking to the press directly. In 1992, a tabloid published a secret audio, Diana's voice, very personal, very candid. There she talked about her suffering, her loneliness, her suicidal thoughts. The tabloid paid millions for this recording. How it got out is still a mystery. There's a theory that someone in her entourage did it. But the scariest part is that her phone was tapped by at least 4 different publications. Over the course of several years, they read her messages, eavesdropped on her conversations, knew where she would be before the guards did. All for the sake of sensationalism. Diana could feel it. She knew she was being used. But she'd also learned how to use the media. When no one would listen to her in the palace, she spoke to the people through the cameras. She openly supported the sick, hugged those dying of AIDS, traveled to hot spots. The press broadcast this to the world, and the people increasingly sided with her. But everything had a price, and she had to pay dearly for that openness. Things spiraled out of control when Diana agreed to an interview that shocked the UK. She told the world for the first time, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." And from that moment on, she began to have a very different life, a life outside the rules, outside the palace and without protection. It was a blow to the monarchy's reputation, and there was no turning back. A year later, at the Queen's insistence, Diana and Charles were officially divorced. But it wasn't just her husband she had divorced. She divorced the whole system. Rules that kept her silent, responsibilities that were killing her from the inside out, and most importantly, the palace where she said she never felt alive. Without the title, she no longer had official status. More importantly, she was stripped of her full security detail, even though Diana had already received threats and felt she was being watched. After the divorce, she was protected only by private bodyguards, and not always. She no longer lived in the palace or took part in royal trips, but she was still the center of attention. Every move she made was discussed. The royal system didn't tolerate that. She began to be sawed off from all official events, even those where she used to shine. But Diana no longer played by their rules. She lived her own way, and that was her real victory. After her divorce, Diana found new meaning in helping those no one wanted to talk about out loud. She became the first person from the royal family to dare to approach, hug, and support those with HIV. It was quite a shock. Back then, people with HIV were afraid to even touch them. Diana purposely did it on camera to show they are not dangerous. They are human beings and they deserve love. This changed the way the disease was viewed around the world. She wasn't afraid of blood, pain, and fear. She could be seen in minefields wearing body armor. She walked through destroyed territories, met with soldiers, the wounded, orphans. For this, she gave up almost everything that resembled her former royal life. But she was still a woman. She wanted love. After her divorce, she had short affairs, but the real passion flared up in the summer of 1997. His name was Dodi al-Fayed, the son of a wealthy Egyptian billionaire. He wasn't English, he wasn't an aristocrat, and that was irritating in high places. Their relationship lasted less than a month, but it was the relationship that became fatal. The paparazzi followed them literally on their heels. Every outing was a hunt. Every kiss on the yacht was a headline. Diana was back in the spotlight, only now she was alone. Without protection, without status, without support. Diana seemed strong, happy, reborn. But too many people didn't want to see her that way. She became uncomfortable and too loud. The night of 30 to 31, August 1997. Paris. Diana and her lover Dodi Al-Fayed leave the Ritz Hotel and get into a car. The driver is in a hurry. They are being chased by paparazzi on motorbikes. The car rushes through the streets of the city and at high speed enters the Alma tunnel. A few seconds later, a terrible accident. Diana is taken to the hospital. A couple of hours later, she's gone. The whole world came to a standstill. People wept in the streets. Millions of flowers were carried to Buckingham Palace. But with the grief came questions. Too many oddities. Too many accidents for it to be just a tragedy. The main question is, why were the cameras in the tunnel temporarily switched off that night? This is one of the most guarded neighborhoods in Paris. Normally, there is 24/7 video surveillance there. But at the exact moment of the crash, not a single frame. No video of the collision, no footage of the motorbikes, no footage of the moment of impact. And then there are more suspicions. The doctors who examined Diana's body said she might not have been treated in time. She was alive at the time of the accident. Her heart was beating. She was breathing. But it took the ambulance nearly an hour to get to the hospital. And it wasn't the closest hospital. Why wasn't she taken to the nearest hospital? Why wasn't she operated on immediately? Dodi Al-Fayed was killed on the spot. So did the driver. The guard in front survived, but with severe head trauma and amnesia. He never remembered what happened in those seconds. And then came another oddity. The driver was found to have a high level of alcohol and drugs in his blood, although the hotel waiters claimed he had not drunk anything. Rumors of a conspiracy began to multiply. Someone believed that Diana's death was an accident caused by a mad chase for a photo. And some are still convinced it was a planned liquidation. She had become too inconvenient, both for the palace and for powerful people. A woman who knew too much, spoke too openly, and went against the system. Even years later, investigations have not yielded a clear answer. The official version is an accident, but millions still wonder, what if it wasn't like that? The most eerie thing is that even her children learned about her death, not from her family, but from outsiders. Princes William and Harry were not immediately told that their mother was gone. They were given time to recover, as if one could prepare a child for such a blow. They themselves later told how they felt that something was wrong, and the adults were silent. And then the strangest thing begins. A couple of weeks after the funeral, rumors began to appear in different countries. Diana was seen alive, in markets in India, in airports, in southern France. Hundreds of people claimed to have met her in person. Some said she had escaped to start a new life. Some said she'd been rescued and was in hiding. These stories sounded crazy, but they didn't die down for years. Because until the end, people didn't believe that such a strong woman could just disappear like that. But whether they believe in the conspiracy or not, one thing is certain. Diana changed the world. She brought the royal family closer to the people. She showed that there is no shame in being vulnerable, that you can fight the good fight even when everyone else is silent. She changed attitudes to charity, to illness, to emotions in public life. She did what no monarch had ever done. She spoke honestly. What do you think about it? Write in the comments.